You are about to witness the very exciting story that will open new sights in familiar surroundings.
The atomic age was born.
It is a story of a city seeking new horizons in a resolute contest with great challenges.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey, and on today's episode we're going to be talking about the Endangered Species Act and why it's good for Missouri. And we have two very knowledgeable guests to help us understand this question. Caroline Pufalt is the Conservation Committee Chair for the Missouri Sierra Club. Thanks for being with us, Caroline.
Glad to be here.
And then Richard Orr is the Paddle Sports Coordinator for the Alpine Shop and also the Chairman of the Public-Private Lands Committee for the Conservation Federation of Missouri. Thanks for being with us, Richard.
Glad to be here.
So let me dive right into it, Caroline, with you. Has the Endangered Species Act worked? You know, you read in the paper people squawking about the Endangered Species Act interfering with this and that. What's the real story?
Well, the Endangered Species Act has certainly been a success. One of the most amazing and examples is the bald eagle. Many of us remember, unless you're very young, remember a time when the bald eagles were in trouble. Their population was in decline. It's our national symbol, but there was real concern about it. But they were one of the first species listed under the Endangered Species Act. And it's been a success because their populations have now rebounded. They're actually pretty numerous in some areas. In Missouri, we're fortunate to be able to see them on the Missouri and Mississippi rivers. And that has been because the Endangered Species Act made us take note and look and learn about what were the problems that these birds were facing. We did find out that they were endangered in part due to a pesticide, DDT, that we were using that was harming not just them but many other birds. We worked on, by we I mean the whole country, worked on protecting their nest sites and making sure that they had reasonable amount of habitat, and it really worked.
Well, that is great. Let me pivot to another issue. Richard, you work in the outdoor recreation industry. How does protecting endangered species help that industry?
Well, John, it helps it a great deal. Most of the people who use our products are out there in the woods, in the wilderness, and they're enjoying the natural spaces, and the species that inhabit those spaces are very integral, and that's what they look for. They want to see hawks and eagles and terns and plovers and all of the wildlife that goes with the areas that they're recreating in. There's nothing to compare with the look on the face of a canoeist who sees an eagle diving for a fish right in front of their boat. There's absolutely no better feeling, and our customers enjoy that, they savor that, and they are expecting that.
When I know that we're fortunate here, just upriver from St. Louis is the biggest concentration of wintering bald eagles in the whole lower 48. So we here in Missouri are especially benefiting from the good work done to bring the bald eagle back from the edge of extinction. Now, many of us are familiar with the bald eagle, Caroline, but tell me about the Ozark hellbender. What is a hellbender? Where does it live, and what does the hellbender need to recover?
Well, we might kind of be going from one extreme to another here using the bald eagle, which many people are aware of and can easily be viewed and seen, to the hellbender, which is actually a large salamander. And some people actually have seen them, and many folks who canoe enjoy seeing salamanders of other types. Mud puppies, for example, are similar to a salamander. But the hellbender, Ozark hellbender, is special because, first of all, it can get very large. The adults can get up to 2 feet. Unfortunately, though, they are endangered. And they're endangered because they really require clean, clear water that's relatively cool. And so they are an indicator of the health of our streams. They used to be very common in the Missouri streams. I read that historically back in the 70s when they were doing kind of an inventory of species along one section of, I think, the Current River, they found like 1,000 hellbenders. And that was like within a mile. But unfortunately, the populations plummeted so that we fear that throughout all the streams in Missouri, there were only about 500 of them. And so they were in dire need of help. And fortunately, they were listed by listing, meaning then they were added to a list of species that the Endangered Species Act recognizes as needing special care, so that we will take care of their habitat, try to keep the water clean, try to avoid disruption to the stream, like gravel mining where it's not appropriate. And fortunately, some things are working and helping the hellbender, but we have a lot of work yet to do.
So the Jack's Fork would be one river where we'd have hellbenders, I would presume.
Right.
And just a couple years ago, a section of the Jack's Fork River was closed to swimming by human beings because of the level of E. coli in the river from horse traffic in the river.
Right.
That seems like a great example of what you're talking about, where
Right.
High levels of E. coli aren't good for the Ozark hellbender, but they're not good for little Joey swimming in the river either. And if we clean up the river, it's good for little Joey and it's good for the hellbender.
Yes, exactly. And that section of the Jack's Fork, actually back in 1998, was recognized as in need of some attention. And unfortunately, it's still listed as being impaired and having some problems. So we, like I said, we have a lot of work to do, but if we do pay attention and use our rivers responsibly, then we can continue to enjoy them, as well as have all these wonderful creatures living in them that we hope we're able to see.
Great. And jumping back to the business perspective, Richard, how does water quality on these Ozark rivers impact your business?
It's tremendously critical because people want clear, fresh, clean water to recreate on. They're much less likely to want to go to impaired streams where the diversity of wildlife is much less, and frankly the water is dingy and cloudy, and they want our crystal clear, fresh, spring-fed Ozark streams. Most of the recreation that our customers participate in with canoes and kayaks and paddleboards is done south of the Missouri River in the Ozark Highlands, where all the crystal clear rivers are. And you can just see that the rivers in northern Missouri are quite nice and lovely, but they're not clear. And people want the clean, clear water, and that's where they go.
So in other words, people want to float on the Current River or the 11 Point, but they're not clamoring to be on the Gasconade or the Sheraton.
Well, the Gasconade is okay, the Chariton, yeah, and the other ones north of the Missouri River primarily are turbid because they're slow. They go through a lot of farmland and alluvial soil, and in some cases they're perfectly clean, but they don't look it. So,
And there might be animals in there, but who knows, because you can't see through the water.
Right.
Whereas I know
right.
when I'm on the current, I can look down and maybe 10 feet deep, but I can see the turtle on the bottom,
Exactly.
Yeah.
just like
Exactly.
There's no water at all.
I'll tell you, the first time I ever saw a hellbender on an Ozark stream, it was a magnificent experience.
Yeah.
And one you carry with you your entire life.
Where'd you see it?
It was on the North Fork of the White River. And I pointed it out to a friend of mine who'd never seen one. And his eyes got as big as saucers. And like, where'd that come from? You know, so.
Yeah, as many times as I've been on the current of the Jack's Fork, I've never seen an Ozark hellbender.
Well, it hasn't been in recent years because they're scarce now.
When I saw recently that there was an old dam that was taken down that was on the North Fork of the White River, and when they were taking away the rubble that was what was left of the dam, they had to first go in and remove the Ozark hellbenders from that dam because they like the rocky habitat where they can hide under the rocks, and there was at least some population of hellbenders that they had to relocate from that particular site.
Right. Yeah, they like large rocks, so they can kind of hide under them, and they are very interesting looking. They're not the most glamorous of creatures, but they have their own charm, and they're sort of large and flat-ish, so they like to kind of nudge under those rocks, and that's how they protect themselves. They have some natural predators, raccoons, for example, and when they're younger, when they're smaller, other fish and obviously raccoons also are, a threat to them. They have their own pattern that helps them survive.
Great. Well, let's take a short break and watch a video about the bald eagle and the success of the Endangered Species Act. We'll be right back.
Hello, Senator's office. I'm sorry, what was that? You're breaking up. Can you repeat that? Can you try calling back? I think we have a bad connection.
Since 1990, the Gateway Green Alliance has worked on environmental and social justice campaigns in St. Louis.
The Gateway Greens have brought dedicated activists to speak at Black and Green Wednesday programs, the annual Pesto Feast, Martin Luther King Day, May Day, and Kwanzaa celebrations.
The Gateway Green Alliance is best known for opposing genetically contaminated foods. We invite activists and scholars from around the world to participate in safe food action and bring their creative art.
We need your support to keep going. Please send your $60 membership check or your $30 low-income check. Best of all, come to a Black and Green Wednesday program, 7:30 p.m. on the first Wednesday of the month at Legacy Books and Cafe.
The Sierra Club is the largest and most influential grassroots environmental organization in the United States. If you care about clean air, clean water, and preserving open space, join the Sierra Club. In Missouri, the Sierra Club's projects include promoting energy efficiency and clean power sources like wind and solar, cleaning up air pollution by retiring dirty, outdated, coal-fired power plants, protecting Missouri's parks like the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. We need you to get more involved. To join the Sierra Club, make a donation, or to find out about Sierra Club events in your area, visit our website at www.missouri.sierraclub.org. or call us at 314-644-1011.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm your host, John Hickey, and on today's episode, we're discussing the Endangered Species Act and why it's good for Missouri. Our two guests to help us understand this situation. First, Caroline Pufalt, Conservation Committee Chair for the Missouri Sierra Club Chapter. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
And then Richard Orr, the Paddle Sport Coordinator for the Alpine Shop and the Chairman of the Public-Private Lands Committee of the Conservation Federation of Missouri. Thanks for being with us, Richard.
My pleasure.
And so let's reverse the order this time and start with you, Richard. In the earlier part of the show, you were talking about the impact of the outdoor recreation industry. Break it down to us for, say you work at the Alpine Shop. How many people work there? How many boats do you sell? How do we understand how big it is?
Well, we're just one company out of quite a number of them, and we're a local chain, so we're not the biggest. We have 5 stores. We sell several hundred canoes and kayaks, as well as all the other camping and skiing and other equipment that we handle, which is all put together about half of our business. And we have about 100 employees, roughly, out of 5 stores, and all of this is dependent on having outdoor spaces to go to recreate for our customers. Because the outdoor industry nationwide is incredibly large, much larger than people realize, $887 billion in revenue generated from sales each year. And these people, it's much less obviously for Missouri, but these people need places to go and rivers to float, and they expect to see healthy environments with the wildlife that they should be seeing, that include all the species endangered and otherwise. And you know, when the Endangered Species Act was passed 44 years ago, in the Senate, the vote was 92-0 to pass it. So there shouldn't be any controversy about having a clean environment, a healthy environment, and all the species that go with it.
Wow. So to put the number of jobs just at one company, the Alpine Shop, in perspective, more people work at the Alpine Shop than the total number of people who mine coal in the state of Missouri.
Well, that's possible.
Okay, there's about 15 coal miners in Missouri, in Bates County, and so actually the Alpine Shop has about 7 times as many employees as all the coal mines in the whole state of Missouri. And yet, if you listen to a lot of our politicians, you would think that it's the reverse, that there's a whole bunch of coal miners in Missouri and nobody that's making a living from outdoor recreation.
Yeah, that is an illusion that they are trying to propagate for some reason.
Great. Well, I'm glad that the Alpine Shop is doing so well. And one thing Richard said was that folks who want to canoe, kayak, what have you, in Missouri rivers want to see clean water, want to see they want to see what's on the bottom. What are some of the things that we can be doing to help address water pollution?
Well, there are quite a lot. In Missouri, some rural areas, or actually maybe not even rural, suburban, have limited water treatment options, and they might have small systems, even maybe septic tanks. Those need to be kept up and inspected. Recently in St. Louis county area, we had a kind of a larger outdoor facility, or what would you call it? Where a place where people would go in and even do some skiing and enjoying the outdoors, and their water treatment system failed, and that was unfortunately something that caused pollution, and they needed to pay a little bit closer attention to that. Our Department of Natural Resources needs to maybe do a few more inspections and help keep people on their toes about their water treatment.
Oh, you're talking about Innsbruck out
Right.
in Warren County.
Right,
City.
Warren County. I'm sorry, yes, thank you.
There's the big fish kill too in that creek where the sewage treatment plant overflowed.
Sure, at
Right,
Creek.
right. Thank you for correcting me on the county. So that's a pretty obvious thing, but there are some things that are less obvious. One is just runoff, what they call non-point runoff, meaning it's not from a pipe, but we can have runoff from farm fields that have pesticides and fertilizer that gets washed away into streams. There are lots of things that we can ask our farmers to do, and some of them are, many of them are doing it to try to keep that from happening. In urban and suburban areas, we have problems with runoff from our own facilities, parking lots, lawns. Those of us that have lawns can try to minimize our use of chemicals. I myself really, well, I wouldn't say I'm the best, have the best yard, but I don't use those any chemicals because they do run off and will end up in a stream. Another thing is when we recreate, we can do that respectfully. We don't want to do any disturbances. We can also help these animals more directly. The Ozark hellbender, which we've talked about, we are actually propagating them through the St. Louis Zoo. The St. Louis Zoo has a program where they are raising them in captivity, and some of those small hellbenders will grow up and will be released into streams, and we want to have those streams be clear and cool and have the appropriate amount of large stones and rocks that are natural to these streams so that they have a good environment for those new hellbenders to thrive.
So that St. Louis institution, the St. Louis Zoo, is also part of the whole Endangered Species Act puzzle and is doing this captive breeding to be able to reintroduce more young hellbenders back into the rivers and hopefully increase the actual indigenous population.
Right.
John, on this topic, I'd like to add
Sure.
one thing, which is that the people who recreate in the outdoors, the hikers, the canoeists, the backpackers, are in a unique position to spot pollution sources, point sources, as they travel around. And if they see something that looks like a dangerous release of something hazardous, they can contact the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. They have a hotline for that, and they will take action.
Well, I know I was talking to a longtime Sierra Club member was one of two brothers who wrote an early seminal book about canoeing in Missouri with the Ballou brothers, I think.
The Bellitz brothers?
Bellitz. And he told me he was canoeing on Deer Creek one day when there was high water, and he went by the old Malincrot plant, and he saw that they were dumping all these chemicals right into Deer Creek, right in Webster Groves, right by my house. I couldn't believe it. But that's a great example of what you just said, Richard, and I've seen that on with Sierra Club outings down on the Current River, where our outings participants will report back to the national park where there's, say, illegal roads that are bringing vehicles down to the river that are then creating erosion in the river, running over rocks and squashing whatever's down there. So I think, Richard, you make a very good point that everybody that's involved in outdoor recreation should see it as their own personal responsibility to make sure that they're doing their part and that the appropriate agencies are doing their part to solve these problems.
Right, and we as citizens need to certainly support our local sewer district and all the facilities and things, infrastructure that helps us control our own water runoff, and that's part of our responsibilities in the cities to help keep the rivers clean.
And speaking of a different part of the state, down in southwest Missouri, there's a Neosho facility that's also involved in endangered species recovery. What's the short version of that?
Well, that facility is, I think, connected with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they are helping to a captive breeding program, a fish hatchery, if you will, for the pallid sturgeon, which is a fish found in the larger rivers. You won't find it ever in the Current River or Jack's Fork, but Mississippi, Missouri, and some of the tributaries, closer to the big rivers. And they are very interesting. They're an ancient fish, meaning
prehistoric.
They're prehistoric.
They go back to the dinosaur days.
Right.
So let me cut you off right there and say thank you to the folks in Neosho at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for their work at the hatchery. We're going to take a short break and see another message about the Endangered Species Act. We'll be right back.
Hello, Senator's office. Excuse me, what was that? Can you say that again? I'm sorry, can you try calling back?
What if we were served a side of truth?
I'll take a super bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Okay, that'll be meat from a pig who can't even turn around, an egg from a bird kept in a cage so small she can't spread her wings, and the milk of a cow whose calf is taken at birth to make veal. Ma'am?
Since 1990, the Gateway Green Alliance has worked on environmental and social justice campaigns in St. Louis.
The Gateway Greens have brought dedicated activists to speak at Black and Green Wednesday programs, the annual Pesto Feast, Martin Luther King Day, May Day, and Kwanzaa celebrations.
The Gateway Green Alliance is best known for opposing genetically contaminated foods. We invite activists and scholars from around the world to participate in safe food action and bring their creative art.
We need your support to keep going. Please send your $60 membership check or your $30 low-income check. Best of all, come to a Black and Green Wednesday program, 7:30 p.m. on the first Wednesday of the month at Legacy Books and Cafe.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Green Time. We're talking about the Endangered Species Act and what it means for Missouri. We have two very knowledgeable guests, Caroline Pufalt, Conservation Committee Chair for the Missouri Sierra Club, Richard Orr, Paddle Sports Coordinator for the Alpine Shop and Public-Private Lands, Chairman for the Conservation Federation of Missouri. We've just got a short time left. Carolyn, what should our two U.S. senators, Senator McCaskill and Senator Blunt, be doing to support the Endangered Species Act?
Well, a couple of very obvious things. First of all, they can help protect the budget for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which is the agency that has the main responsibility for the Endangered Species Act. And then, in their job as senators, they can look for legislation that might be harmful or perhaps helpful to the Endangered Species Act. And that might come in a bill that really is directly about the Endangered Species Act, or maybe indirectly deals with another agency like the Forest Service or Army Corps of Engineers or something, all these other agencies that will end up often having some role in protecting our endangered and rare species. So
our U.S. senators need to really keep their eyes open on the legislation for any backdoor attacks on the Endangered Species Act.
Yes, and listen to citizens like us who have concerns about it.
Great. And then you have a quote you want to leave us on, Richard.
Well, yeah, species extinction has always been very near and dear to me, and trying to prevent it. 103 years ago, last week, we lost the last passenger pigeon. And the American naturalist William Beebe expressed it best when he said, when the last member of a species breathes its last, another heaven and earth must pass before such a one can be again.
Well, you've heard it here. See you next week.
Did I make it?